This is Film Tank.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
Oh, I don't know if it's on, but I like it.
You know, we're sitting here like a couple of regular fellas.
We're going to make film history.
Can you say that again? Just the way you said it.
Poor baby is starting to lose their head.
They won't know what they're looking at or why they like it, but they'll know they want it.
It's not bro time, it's showtime. Are you guys ready?
Hello there again, friends, and welcome in to episode 232 of Film Tank. As always, I am Alex Diekman, along with one of my regular partners, Nick Cheney.
Pew pew! Hey!
It's good to have you, bud.
Well, you don't.
As always. Oh. Well, that's a real dick thing to say.
Well.
Joining us again, as now we are able to venture outside of the studio with doing the podcast via Skype instead of in our little studio that we have. Sarah Bush joining us again. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Necessity is the mother of invention. That's what I always was brought up to know. Yes, this terrible world we're living in has forced us to think outside the box, and now we're transgressing physical boundaries. So that's cool.
That's so cool. So elegant, the way you just said that, too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I've been thinking about it all day. Just wanted to share that with you guys.
Well, thank you. I think, at least speaking for myself, we appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me again, you guys. This is my third time here, so I am what you call a regular.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, and it took like 3 years for you to have your second appearance, and now it's been only about a month and a half in between appearances. So that's great.
You know, this is what they call a silver lining.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to shame anybody, but I think we've only had one person on one episode, guest-wise. So you are in
So you're saying I ain't shit yet?
No, I'm saying you're now in the annals of repeat guests. Well, I guess you were actually about a month ago, but
But I was in apparently some sort of distinguished company before then. I'd like to know who is that person who was only in one episode, but that's probably not couth to talk about.
I mean, yeah, it's not that it's not public knowledge, it just feels weirdly mean to just single them out, so I'll send you a Facebook message.
Okay.
Yes. Singling out of people on a podcast. Is there
maybe.
any more American thing to do?
Maybe we'll cut this part out, but now that we're talking about it, Alex, do you remember who I'm talking about?
Please don't. This is gold.
I do.
Okay, I was just curious.
I do. It was a friend of Tucson's.
Yeah, that's the only one person I can think of. So, anyway.
And I will say this. I don't necessarily think like the next week we were like, well, that person's never coming back again. It just has never happened.
I was going to say, they were an extension of another person, and that person, which is totally fine. But you know what? That person, I will give a shout out and say I believe they actually stayed and watched the movie with us.
It was probably a bad one that you picked.
I think it was, actually. So, kudos to anybody who's in a weird social situation like that where they barely know all the people, but yeah, it wasn't that bad.
You know what would have been better? If Toussaint just bailed halfway through the movie and then left her there, that'd been great.
That would have been good. Oh, we now have a contextual clue.
Oh shit.
Anyway,
that's all right. I think it's fine. Any seasoned listener will know exactly who we're talking about.
Yeah, they would have to be so seasoned it would be burning my mouth.
Oh boy, that would be like the guy, was a comic book guy.
Yeah,
somebody else bringing up the
fired for that blunder.
You struck the same rib and had a different noise. I hope someone got fired over that.
Well, you are preaching
back when the Simpsons were good 20 years ago.
Yeah.
What's that?
I was saying you're preaching Simpsons to the Sarah Bush choir over there.
It's true. I do think of myself as something of a Simpsons sort of expert of a very select number of seasons. You lose it, though. It's like a language that I grew up with, but I don't speak it that much anymore, So
here's what I'll say about that. So I actually thought the same thing because I pretty much saw every episode multiple times from episode 1 through episode probably 300. And
the bowling episode.
Yeah, dude. Okay.
Right?
So I watched, I think 5 or 6 episodes earlier this year when I was on my way to Las Vegas, back when people were allowed to leave their state. And
that whole setup in itself is a crazy thought, but sorry, go ahead. People used to go places.
Yeah, back in the day. Anyways, I watched 5 or 6 episodes from, that era, which was, not awful like they have been for the last decade plus. And I just remembered almost everything about every episode that I watched. I hadn't seen them in probably 15 years. So that was eye-opening.
Wow, the 300th episode.
It doesn't, yeah.
Is from 2002 to 2003, that season. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Time, man.
They had their run.
I mean, they're still going somehow, but they're
still lumbering along.
Okay, genuine question for people that watched The Simpsons in its heyday. Whenever they announce a final season, do you think the final episode has potential to be good? Whenever it is?
No.
Probably. I actually thought... Okay, I'll say this. It wasn't great, but I actually thought the movie was somewhat of a close return to form when it came out. It wasn't...
That was I was in the 6th grade or something when that came out. Maybe.
Okay, that's true, but The Simpsons had been
I have a
pretty mundane.
Right
The Simpsons were pretty
mundane. Now, it could be revoked at any minute.
You shut your mouth.
They were pretty mundane for many years before that movie came out.
Yeah.
So I feel like if there's a special event like that, there's potential for it to be, and also too, they'll know that they're going to have a lot of eyes on it as well. So I feel like there will be more effort. But what does that mean? What does more effort for The Simpsons mean? I don't know.
I don't know. Getting Hank Azaria to voice Apu one last time in a touching tribute.
He delivers the final oddly poignant line of the series. And he says, oh no, I was going to do it. I was going to say, he says, thank you and come again. But
you were going to do it in an accent.
Yeah.
You're part of the problem.
It's going to be terrible. I am part of the problem. But I remember when I saw the movie and I just caught it on TV one day, maybe 10 years ago. And I had never obviously sought out the movie before because that was the first time I was seeing it. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, like, obviously it's more ambitious. It's, like, more entertaining than some random throwaway episode from the contemporary TV series. But, like, it still just couldn't even approach the tone or the highs of this of the first, like, 8 seasons or whatever. So, I don't know.
No, I mean, I think
the movie just doesn't cut it either, so I'm very skeptical that the series finale can do it either.
I pretty much agree with what you're saying, even though I, for the most part, enjoyed the movie more than I've enjoyed any episode that I've seen in the last 400 episodes they've done. But I feel like another problem with The Simpsons is that society and culture and comedy and television have changed a lot, and they're still doing the same shit every single episode, and it really hasn't changed, and it's pretty basic as it's not evolved at all, I don't think, over the years.
I think there's...
that just... I just had this thought, going back to something that we were talking about before we hit record, like, another thing that makes me feel my age is I just thought of a friend of mine who was not even alive when I considered, and many considered, The Simpsons still good. And it makes me wonder about, like, some of these long-running institutions like SNL or like The Simpsons, and it's like, is this relevant at all to young people right now? And I don't count myself among them anymore. Like, does my friend Cheyenne even watch or care about The Simpsons, or, like, does she evaluate it on its own terms? Does she watch classic Simpsons? Like, these are the questions that keep me up at night, you know, with this world where nothing else is happening. Is how does Gen Z
She puts
think
it on
about The
Disney
Simpsons?
Plus, and she's like, this isn't the right aspect ratio.
I would have a lot of respect for her if I heard that.
I will say, as a non-Simpsons expert, I've only really seen the first 4 seasons in their entirety, and, like, 5 through 8 I've always been meaning to sit down and watch. Like, I know I've seen episodes from it, but I wasn't, like, watching it religiously when I was growing up, so I never caught them all. Anyway, what I was going to say is that there's one late episode of The Simpsons, which isn't very late relative to now, that I feel like gives me some hope that, like, if they did a final episode, they would take it a little seriously, which, the one episode that's, like, post the first 10 seasons that I always go back to as being, like, decent, because it seemed like they were trying, is the, one called, Eternal Moonshine of the Simpsons Mind, which is, I guess, from the 19th season, from the year 2007. Because I remember I had randomly watched that, I think because people were talking about it or something like that, and it's always stuck with me. But it's a slightly more dramatic episode, but only as dramatic as, like, The Simpsons, you know, will get, which in its heyday... I was going to say, in its heyday, it, like, can and did, but was kind of a afterthought after a certain era, for sure. So, I'm saying I think due to weird blips like that episode, for example, even though that was back in 2007, I feel like they could pull something off, but the longer they drag it out, the I don't know, I feel like the worse.
The less likely it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, anything's possible, and I feel like regardless of what the episode would actually contain, because, well, I don't know why I say would, like, the show has got to end at some point. Whenever that does end, you know, just, you know, people will affix some kind of meaning to it, or, like, some poignancy outside of its actual merit as an episode. But, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it will be an affront to God itself, and people will burn down the rest of the United States in effigy.
That's true, it could.
that's another possibility that I see. But that's for the 45th season, I hope.
I just found an article by the critic Matt Zoller Seitz. The article headline is 9 Latter-day Simpson episodes that match up to the early classics, and that's where I got the title for this one because I couldn't remember what it was called. But that article, 9 Latter-day, is from February 2012. So...
funny.
It's just like, even then people were thinking like, yeah, this will be over one of these days. So, but no.
Yeah.
Anyway. But you know what was also in its heyday in the 90s? Scorsese.
What's that? Whoa!
Hey, look at that. So, Martin Scorsese... I mean, as only Nick can be. So, Martin Scorsese has been covered multiple times on this podcast, as we've mostly done his gangster films, but we've done other films like Silence. And he's obviously got a very deep catalog. And this film, Bringing Out the Dead from 1999, I would say is one of his more under-the-radar films, at least in terms of mainstream knowledge about it, as I had never seen it before, and Martin Scorsese is my favorite film director, so that obviously is not a good start for me or for this film, but at any rate, this film... is surrounding haunted... I'm sorry, there was not a good way to start that. Haunted by the patients he failed to save, an extremely burned-out Manhattan ambulance paramedic fights to maintain his sanity over 3 fraught and turbulent nights. So the film, other than being directed by Martin Scorsese, is based on a novel by Joe Conley and written by Paul Schrader, who also wrote Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, and more recently wrote the film First Reformed, which I know both Nick and Toussaint are quite fond of. So the film stars Nicolas Cage as Frank Pierce, and also features Patricia Arquette as Mary Burke. There's a lot of other people who come and go throughout this film, as it's more of an ensemble cast that moves in and out of the 3 nights that we see Frank go through. Those people include John Goodman, Ving Rhames, Mark Anthony, Cliff Curtis, and also Tom Sizemore. So, Nick, you suggested this film, so why don't you start us off by letting everyone know why you chose this as a film that you thought we should do and what your opening thoughts are on it.
Okay, absolutely not. No, I'm just kidding. I, this year, have started to do some back catalog Scorsese, and this was one of them. And so I first watched this just this year, earlier, probably back in January or February, before the world turned upside down. And I liked it so much upon that initial viewing that I had already started thinking about when I would, choose it for the podcast, because I thought it would lead to a good discussion. And I generally thought that there was no way that any of us who are regularly on the podcast would, hate it. I just thought it was good and a safe choice. So I rewatched it for this episode, of course, and I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. I definitely think it is very unfairly kind of maligned in Scorsese's career. He makes so many different kinds of films that is very sometimes frustrating when I see people think of him as a gangster filmmaker, because while he obviously made quite a few of those, if you actually take the ratio of how many those are with how many other movies he made, it's a small percentage, and he just did so many different things over the years, and that's how it's, possible for a movie like Bringing Out the Dead to kind of fall by the wayside. But in reality, Bringing Out the Dead does share so much with so much DNA with some of his other projects that it's kind of surprising that it's not talked about more. Alex had brought up the fact that it's written by Paul Schrader, so obviously there's that collaboration between Scorsese and Schrader, whether it's them doing Taxi Driver or this, and both of them share a certain religious intensity, because I think Travis Bickle is very similar to someone like Frank Pierce in this movie, and that they are these kind of Christ-like figures that are going through their lives in a time of kind of an existential crisis where the internal struggles they face seem almost next to nothing to the just utter chaos of the world outside them, and how they're supposed to react and live and engage with that world. I love the script in this movie. I think it's got just enough about, I would say, just enough of everything to just keep me engaged from scene by scene. I think it's a generally funny film through and through, which is not to say that it's a straight-up comedy, but some of these side characters certainly add a touch of zaniness, so to speak, to Frank's underlying mental issues, that it is genuinely entertaining to see John Goodman, complain about beef lo mein, or Ving Rhames just shout out Bible verses while Frank is just trying to get through their shift. But what I love is that ultimately this is honestly one of the same movie that Scorsese has made forever, from his very first movie to one of his most recent, like Silence, which is that he is fascinated by the Catholic Church and really Christianity in general, and how a human being kind of navigates that spiritual and secular conversion, and where one gives and the other one takes. And I think the script is one of the best examples of that. I think Paul Schrader's dialogue, which almost has, even more so than something like Taxi Driver, but I think Bringing Out the Dead almost has like an ear for a noir structure when it comes to the way Frank's narration peppers out the actual action on screen. I mean, one of my favorite I think lines in the movie is, he says, I came to realize that my work was less about saving lives than about bearing witness. I was a grief mop. And like those two sentences together is kind of a good microcosm for what this film does well, which is that like that first sentence is like super profound, and you can't say it better, but then it's punctuated by that second sentence of just kind of a silly, simile, like I was a grief mop. And I feel like that's this film in a nutshell. It's dealing with some very dark and underlying sadness that the character is dealing with, but it's also punctuating it with these weird moments of, if not levity, then at least just unpredictable spontaneity that is inherent, I think, in the human condition, but still bewildering nonetheless. And I could go on and on, but I won't yet. But just know that I think Nicolas Cage is perfectly casted. I think he is like the patron saint of insomnia. So I think he's very, very well utilized in this movie. I love when John Goodman says like, "Oh, what do you want to eat tonight?" And he says something like, "Oh, nothing." And then he's like, "Oh, that's right, you don't eat." And then the way Nicolas Cage is like, I eat. And, anyway, it's just, there's so many great little scenes in here, and obviously the Tom Sizemore character, which we'll talk more about. But yeah, I have a lot to say. I'll end my opening thoughts by saying I think what clinches this movie for me for having a pretty high rating, which I'll get to obviously later, because I love it all the way through. But then it's the final sequence that ends the movie on a higher level than I thought was possible with what came before, with Patricia It's Patricia, right? Arquette? Not.
Yeah.
I always get them confused, unfortunately. But with Patricia Arquette's line of, in the doorway, she says, like, no one asked you to suffer or whatever. And then she's like, that was your idea. And just the simplicity of that, in retrospect and in conjunction with reflecting back on his problems, is just super, super profound and can have a very lasting impact on the right viewer. So I'm a big fan of this movie. What did you guys think?
I was very pleasantly surprised. I was probably one of those people who unfairly thinks of Martin Scorsese's filmography as just really heavily gangster based, and when I heard that you had picked this movie out and it was Scorsese, I was like, fuck, I'm going to have to devote 3 hours of my life to this epic, sprawling drama. And, like, I do sort of know better, and I have seen other, not very many, but some lesser-known movies in his career that don't fit the mold. So when it turned out to be, like, still a very noticeably like Scorsese movie in terms of like the tone and the energy and the music, but like just in terms of the scale, like the time frame, and that it's just, I don't know, following this this haunted guy and this ensemble around him. I don't know, I just found it like a little bit more easily digestible than other movies of his that like I feel like I have to carve out time for. And like appreciate because they have such a stature in American cinema or whatever, which makes it sound like I'm damning this movie with faint praise. Like I thought it was really good, but like I was saying to Nick before we started recording, I was watching this movie just on a laptop late at night, and he'd made the comment that like it's kind of a good movie to watch in that sort of drowsy state. And that was something that also really struck me about this movie is I think how well and how quickly it immerses you into this really unfamiliar and dreary world. Like from the very first shots when you're looking at Nicolas Cage's eyes, and you just have all these lights and sounds and sensations hitting you, and you just are bombarded from the beginning with like all of these people and some of the worst moments of their life. Like you kind of quickly become acquainted with like some taste of what that life must be like as a first responder like that, and it's just, it really wears you down. So when I was watching it and I was already kind of worn down, like it really kind of resonated with me. So I really liked it. I thought it was really immersive. I also thought it had a lot of really funny moments, and great cast too. Like I also thought Nicolas Cage was like, this was like peak Cage. It was not over the top too much, but like exactly the right amount of unhinged for him to do. And like as the movie progresses and his eyes are getting redder and redder, it's just like he's just so perfectly inhabiting this character. And those are my preliminary thoughts about it. I was pleasantly surprised by it.
So, again, I had never seen this, which as a Scorsese, I don't want to say super fan, but as a big fan, anytime I find a movie that I have not seen of his, I'm intrigued and interested to check it out. So obviously I was all on board for this. And I will say that my feelings on this are, it is quite good, especially on a first-time viewing, although towards the bottom of my Scorsese ratings, as this is really the kind of film of his that doesn't really reach out to me. I'm much more into the films that makes Sarah want to walk away from the television, apparently. But that's okay, 'cause everyone's obviously totally different. And
they don't make me want to walk away. They just make me tired with what I feel like I have to bring to the table to watch them. But go on.
I very much understand. I mean, The Irishman was longer than a flight to California from Illinois, and all of his other films are, for the most part, from the last 2 decades, have been in that 3-hour range. So I do not go against anyone who thinks that that's a wee bit too long in this era. At any rate, so this film, I was a fan. And again, I didn't love it, but I quite enjoyed it. I felt like the interesting part of this film is it really found a way to have different tones throughout the 3 sections of the film. We have the very kind of relaxed and what really felt like an everyday at the job on his first night with John Goodman, which makes sense, as that's his regular co-pilot, his regular partner. And, that just felt like every other day that he's probably had for the last however many days, months, years, whatever, other than the idea of basically bringing someone back to life in the apartment in the first scene of the film. And then we have the second scene, which is fantastic, with Ving Rhames, where I'm sorry, but I was pretty much cracking up at the end of that fake resurrection when he's pretty much shouting out, "Jesus, Lord, bring back Happy Bangin'." I don't know. That was awesome.
That was amazing.
And I actually really liked everything about Ving Rhames' character, whether it's his obsession with this idea of being a, religious follower who's bringing Jesus to these people in their time of need, which seems very gross to me. And at the same time, he also weirdly is continuously hitting on the operator who is not interested. So
Queen Latifah.
That's
I thought
really?
that was
Yep,
her.
that's her voice.
I know Martin Scorsese was one of the operators
those
as well. So
those two, it's the king and the queen.
oh boy. And then obviously the final night with Tom Sizemore, which is pretty much like a coked out, crazy psycho fest. And different tones, a lot of different settings, even though we're in the same area of Manhattan throughout it. It just makes the film very, I would say, fresh throughout the 3 parts of the film. And I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed Nicolas Cage's performance. I thought he was good here. And in general, I think when casted in a film that gives him an opportunity to give a decent performance, he usually is pretty good, even if he's not like a Daniel Day-Lewis type actor. But at the same time, he's well casted here and gives a very solid performance. And I also very much liked Tom Sizemore here. He's perfectly casted because he's a complete piece of shit in real life. So he didn't have to go very far for this role, and he succeeded. So I was a fan of him, and obviously Ving Rhames. And I'll say the one last thing, and this is getting a little in-depth, I guess, for opening thoughts. But I guess I'll pose this question then after I finish my thought and then get everyone else's thoughts, since we'll move into more general remarks. But I felt like everything in the hospital was pretty great. I mean, that's a great sort of view for this film and what it's trying to say about these people in this area in Manhattan in the early 90s, which is, I think, in the opening title when it says that this is supposed to take place. And this film has a lot to say about these people in this area and these conditions, because this hospital is basically, at least the waiting room area, looks like a police station. There's there's people being arrested, there's people handcuffed, there's people arguing, security officer who is standing in front of the door and not allowing anyone through and kind of being an asshole about it. And I understand why he is. This is a different hospital than most people are accustomed to, which makes sense because especially as we are very much, some people are awakening to the fact now, but very much a different world than a lot of people live in, where healthcare and just getting the help that you need when you need it is not a right, and you have to go somewhere where you can basically be turned away unless you're on death's doorstep. And the other side of the coin is that we see this a lot, obviously, with Tom Sizemore's character. The people who are working in this hospital and in the medical field have almost grown a gross detest for these people who they serve, sometimes multiple times. And there certainly is a very hard racial tension in this film that is not, there's not a lot of time spent on it, but it's definitely there, especially watching this film 20 years after it came out. So I really enjoyed that part. I thought it landed really well, especially watching it in the current environment that we're living in. And I'm interested what you guys thought about all of the scenes that took place in the hospital.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Those were definitely highlights for me.
I think the fact that you described the ER as basically like a police station is probably not accidental. I think one of the things that's so interesting about the day-to-day happenings, so to speak, of these first responders and paramedics is that the line is incredibly blurred of what their role in society is. There's, what they were hired to do, and then there's what they end up having to do just to, facilitate actual healthcare. And a lot of the time it starts to look more like what we would think police do or social workers do and whatnot. And it was extremely interesting to watch it in this June of 2020 because it was funny. Obviously, there's a couple of characters like Tom Sizemore's character and certainly Frank Pierce on a bad day who have horribly sadistic tendencies, which I think we're learning is all too real. But it also kind of shown how much empathy public first responders have if they're coming at it from a place of wanting to go save a person rather than wanting to go, I don't know what you want to say, I guess, like solve a dispute or something like that, Like, their goal before they get there is to do no harm. And I feel like that in and of itself is fascinating on a dramatic level in the movie, like what they have to do. I mean, like when he tells Noel that they're not allowed to kill people on the street, they have to bring them back to the ER, to the special room where they'll kill them there, that was weirdly effective because, it's one of those things where that sounds awful on paper, but when you have a person on drugs and, not gonna, then there's something empathetic about trying to speak their language, no matter how fucked it is, or how many degrees removed it is from proper protocol. That's kind of touching, at least in that way. Obviously, we see with characters like Tom Sizemore's character that, it can be taken the other way, which is people who think that they have the right to do anything because without them, they, be nowhere. And certainly doesn't let either of those types of personalities go without being mentioned.
Yeah, that, this whole discussion ties into what I thought was one of the most striking things about watching the movie right now in the present era is that, with COVID, there's like an increased, at least demonstration of appreciation for people in the medical profession and first responders and, all kinds of workers who are deemed essential, but like especially people who deal with sick people. And there's a lot of like, in my opinion, very glib assessments of them as heroes, and then we just kind of move on as they, go about their business without the proper compensation, safety protocols, support of all kinds, et cetera, et cetera. But they're heroes. We appreciate them so much. We're applauding for them every night, And so here's this piece of media that I feel like has a very unvarnished look at this profession, and like, there are some people like Nicolas Cage's character who, by his own account, used to be pretty good at his job, and I think has some kind of conscience and empathy, but he's not like this, archetype of somebody who is, heroic, I guess. And then there's the Tom Sizemore character who is just decidedly not good at his job, being judge, jury, and executioner. And like the scenes in the hospital as they're doing, very understandable triage and assessing severity of cases and all, like we see them just kind of confront some of these cases in ways, or like treat or talk about like, the homeless people they have coming through, or like some of the regulars, in ways that are like kind of crass or surprising at first, but like they're understandable. I guess what I'm trying to say is like they make it really, I don't know, they really do a good job making it seem like, I don't know, you're actually there doing the day-to-day work and understanding what it's like and how it is still just a job. Even though you're dealing with life and death, there are certain problems you run up against that are just, Nick, you sound like you're ready to say something. Help me out here.
Well, I was going to say that to expect a certain level of probably compassion is slightly disillusioned, because if they were that passionate about, or that emotional and whatnot, then they wouldn't be able to do their job, because it's already sucking the life out of them.
Yeah, that's right. And this is territory that I think that other medical centered dramas have done before. Like I know there were episodes of ER and probably like every other doctor drama that's like, damn it, that one just really got to me. Like, I can't let it get under my skin or else I can't do the job. It's like kind of a cliche probably when that comes up now, but there was just something about the way that this movie treated it that, like, I don't know, it seemed a lot more real and humanizing of first responders to me, that I really, really liked. Like, watching Cage's character go from call to call and to some of these scenes that would be the apex of some drama, but no, it's just like another part of his night, and now he's going on to the next one. And like, yeah, of course they have kind of callous nicknames for some of the people that they're treating, or like it takes them forever to respond to a call because they're fucking burnt out. It's hard as hell. And I don't know, like the movie does such a good job, I think, of like throwing you into that world that like when Patricia Arquette's character is gonna offer the Mark Anthony character some water, you're already like, as if you were like, big mistake, should not. I already know better than to offer that guy water, because I have the same world weariness of all these professionals who deal with this shit all day long. So that was...
It's like giving a gremlin water. You don't do it.
Exactly. And then, as we all know, he did turn into, what he turned into later in the movie, a blood-soaked madman.
So true.
I didn't realize that was Mark
scene.
Anthony until after the movie was over, by the way, and I was like, what?
J-Lo?
Exactly. I could kind of see what she saw in him for those 3 years they were married. Yeah, I looked it up. Or was it 10?
Apparently, this was filmed while Nicolas Cage and Patricia Arquette were married.
They were married?
Oh.
Yeah, I remember hearing that a long time ago, but I forgot about it. And then when I was looking this film up, it was like, this film was made during their 2-year marriage. And I was like, oh.
Hollywood is weird, man.
Yep.
Yeah, and to kind of echo something too, Alex was saying that about the contemporary viewership is it is just like now that the whole, not like healthcare has never been in the forefront of people's mind, but I feel like it's a bit more front and center of a discussion even before the worldwide pandemic hit. So just to see how people in desperate need of help are treated in this movie, it kind of is shocking as a 2020 viewer. Like, well, this sure is making the case that people have right to care, and they're just not receiving it. Now, is that the explicit message of the movie that you were supposed to be thinking about the whole time? No, I'm sure not. But it's hard not to think that as you're watching it.
Hell yeah.
So, really quick, what I was going to mention about the Mark Anthony character of Noel and his blood-soaked scene, for whatever reason, the view of that, I loved that, was his dreadlocks and just spinning his head around and blood going everywhere. And I just felt for Nicolas Cage as he is just a mess after that. And, this is a guy who's legitimately, threatening to commit suicide and is bleeding all over himself. So, there is a lot going on there in that moment. And, for these, other than Tom Sizemore, these ambulance drivers or paramedics or first responders or whatever you want to call them, in this environment, this is just another day at the office. And, oh man, every day just having to go out and figure out how to best treat a patient who is like this. And really that's what the film goes down to in the end, at least for me, is that there are many different ways to treat a patient. And, this film really goes forward at the end as we have Frank Pierce pulling the plug on someone who his family didn't say they wanted to have the plug pulled on. As we have the stark opposite of Tom Sizemore, who almost murders Noel in the street with a baseball bat, which is a really horrific scene that has, other than a throwaway line of, I think he's going to make it, which may not have been totally genuine. We have almost no resolution to that other than seeing Tom Sizemore trying to destroy his ambulance at the very end of the film, which was a little odd, I thought. But at any rate, that Nicolas Cage final scene as he's been dealing with the spirit of Patricia Arquette's father since almost the beginning of the film, and that kind of weird mercy killing of the idea of someone who's taking a life to help a soul out. That goes pretty, at least for me, that goes pretty deep, especially in a film that's led by Nicolas Cage.
Absolutely. And, that kind of goes with the whole, I think, religious, not even undercurrent, it's pretty much an overcurrent. I mean, you literally have his girlfriend named Mary, you have Mark Anthony's character is technically a Noel, and obviously the Red Cross on any ambulance, the burden to bear. And what I find interesting is that I feel like toward the end, he gives up, I think, a little bit on the idea of saving people. Not in a way that means that he's given up on the job, but just on that being his form of salvation, and because he can't, and he, like in a very Jesus Christ-like way, he can't perform miracles over and over and over because then they have no meaning, and there would... And so I'm a very big fan of the fact that the climax kind of ends with him being more of an arbiter than an actual deity, I guess, for lack of a better word.
I don't know. He kind of becomes the angel of death.
Wah, wah,
so if you're cool with that,
I am cool with that.
Actually, no. I think. Yeah, to the difference of the Tom Sizemore character who, has his beef with Noel and why he's trying to cause him grievous bodily harm. Like, that sort of person making a decision, a life or death decision, is quite different from the decision that Frank makes, which ultimately I think comes from an actual understanding and compassion and understanding of life and death for, this guy, or psychopathy, like hearing the voices in his head, and maybe he didn't have the right to make that decision for the patient. But in the context of the movie, I thought it was, actually a moving thing, and a good scene, and very effective.
It's funny that, we're a little ways into this great episode, and we haven't mentioned Rose, his patient that he failed to save so many months prior to the events of the movie, which led him into this, I guess, rut, psychological, existential crisis, you want to call it. But Rose is a character throughout the entire film, despite obviously never being present in reality. What did you guys think that was like too in the background? Because even the climax hinges on that plot line, because we see Rose finally. It's one thing for Rose to show up in the actual, in visions of people on the street, but it's another thing for Rose to be the vessel that he sees Patricia Arquette's Mary say, "It's not your fault," I was curious, what did you guys think of that whole arc and impetus for the character?
I actually didn't love that part of the film.
Okay, Sarah, what did you think? No.
I loved it. It was actually good, and anybody who thinks that it wasn't is wrong.
Thank you, guys.
I'm kidding. Alex,
film snobs win. Okay, no. So I didn't love that aspect of it, mostly because I was much more personally invested and interested in this idea of Nicolas Cage having this existential crisis and seeing different spirits of people. And I got the vibe from Rose's character and Nicolas Cage's vision of her that this is the reason why he's having all of this, and not because of the people that he's currently trying to save. And for me, it took away a little bit from the actual story that was going on throughout the events that were transpiring throughout here. Like, I guess more so what I'm really trying to get at is that, Rose is obviously a major symbol throughout the film, but, we keep seeing him see her and having this idea of trying to save her, but it doesn't really match up with everything else that's going on in the film for me, especially with the tone that's going on in the different scenes that we see, or the different parts of the film as the three nights progress. So I don't know. I mean, again, I've only seen the film the one time, so it hasn't had a lot of time to marinate. So I wouldn't put myself as a lot of thought given into this, but just on the first viewing, it wasn't my favorite part of the film.
You know, I don't have a real strong reaction to how they used Rose in the end, where basically he was seeking some sort of redemption for her death in particular, and how how she's superimposed on the Patricia Arquette character. Like that, it is definitely interesting that it does sort of fall in line with the whole religious allegory and the idea of forgiveness and all of this. But I thought that it was really, but prior to that, just really poignant the way that she cropped up in, just in the faces of the people that Frank would see on the street. And I thought that was another really good thing that the movie tackled, is just the idea of trauma and how it manifests, and how, there is this one person that the protagonist can't shake. Like, I'm sure just like in the real world, people who do this thing, like, they must know that outside of their own skills and ability, you're going to encounter quote unquote failures, or you're going to lose people, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you, but some of them just stick with you more. And I liked the way that the film depicted Rose's appearances throughout, and then just like kind of how harrowing it was when we saw Frank's trip and kind of visited sort of how it actually all went down. But yeah, I'm still very fresh to all of this too, Alex. So I haven't really thought a ton about what I think about like the furtherance of like any religious allegories. But one thing I will say that I thought was kind of interesting when I afterwards was reading the synopsis of this, like just on Wikipedia and elsewhere, is how it described this movie like a supernatural thriller, or maybe not thriller, but the word supernatural was definitely in there. And I was like, I don't know if I would have really thought that. I certainly didn't think that on my own. And I suppose they call it supernatural, or like the copywriter calls it supernatural, because like you are maybe seeing a ghost, or like just seeing a ghost, or like having some kind of weird psychic connection Frank experiences with Patricia Arquette's father. But I certainly never interpreted it as anything like actually ghostly happening. I thought of it as like actually very natural, like what a mind does to cope with incredibly stressful, difficult, awful things it's going through. So I thought that part was interesting. I don't know how you guys thought about it.
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like the title does it no favors, and I like the title.
I do too. I think the title's great. Yeah. I actually forgot. Yeah.
But I watched this with my dad, and I said, hey, I'm going to watch a movie, and he asked what it was called, and I said, Bringing Out the Dead, and he goes, oh, I've never heard of it, and I said, oh, it's got Nicolas Cage in it, and he's like, oh, and he's like, nah, he goes, you watch a lot of weird horror movies, and I was like, no, I'm like, actually, and like, he's not stupid for thinking that, as far as that.
Oh, no, not at all.
But I'm like, no, it's actually... I was like, it's about he's a paramedic, and he's like, what? I'm like, well, I had to think for a second, not because it's such a weird title, but I'm like, well, I mean, think about paramedics. They go in there to save people. Sometimes they bring out the patients. Sometimes they bring out the dead. And
you should have pushed your glasses up your nose and said, oh, actually, Dad, it is a horror movie. Yeah. It's about the horrors of modern society.
You know what's scary? Healthcare, motherfucker. Yeah, so I definitely think that title almost lends itself. And certainly the way the movie is shot. I mean, you have these extremely washed out images, and you have lights that are overtaking the lens, and not in a gimmicky lens flare J.J. Abrams way, but in an actual way that almost suggests some kind of, specter or ethereal plane that Nicolas Cage is essentially wandering to and from. On that subject, I am curious, just as an impression, what you guys thought about the detour this movie takes into Cliff Curtis's character's den of drugs, with the character of Psy and the whole drug sequence. I really yep. I was gonna say a fun fact, which is that during the drug trip sequence that Nicolas Cage has, when you see the actual flashback of him trying to save Rose, apparently that, if you think it has Lynchian quality, it is because the actors performed the movements in reverse, and then the footage was reversed.
Boy, now I just have goosebumps. Wow.
I thought so.
Hollywood, baby.
I will say, and then I'm going to also just kind of spur this into a general feeling on drugs in this film as well, if that's all right.
They're good.
Yeah, man.
I thought you were going to say a general feeling on drugs.
Yes. Well,
this is actually a PSA podcast.
So anyways, I love that scene you're referencing. And as soon as it started, and just the idea of the snow moving up from the ground and the way that the characters are moving, I didn't know about it being shot backwards, but I just loved the look of that.
That makes a lot of sense in retrospect. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, what a cool effect. And then now it's like, oh, movie magic, I guess. So I really liked the character of Cliff. I thought that
character
everything.
Psy. His name is
Psy.
in real life is
His
Cliff.
name is Cliff.
I know, it's
Thank
confusing.
You.
I love that guy.
Yep.
He shows up in a lot of random things, and most recently he just showed up in Dr. Sleep as a very important secondary character. Anyway, shout out because he doesn't get a lot of love.
Aww.
I mean, maybe he does.
Certainly.
I don't know.
We don't know. It's not our place to know.
I thought his real name was the character's name, so obviously it's not going great. So I liked that sequence quite a bit. And I enjoy this storyline going on in the background about Black Death, or what is the name of the heroin drug that's floating around?
Right, yeah.
I think Black Death
okay.
is an orgasm. Isn't that what the Black Death is? Like that phrase? Also,
is it?
Maybe not. Maybe I'm just projecting, I guess, a little bit. Or am I thinking of like Little Death?
You're thinking, in French, I think that is an idiom that actually exists. Yeah. And for all we know, I'm sure there are kinds of strange
La
sayings.
petite mort is an expression which means the brief loss or weakening of consciousness, and in modern usage refers specifically to the sensation of post-orgasm as likened to death. So I was thinking of the Little Death, not Black Death.
Well, if you think that makes you not worthy of roasting, you're wrong.
The Black Death was the bubonic plague.
There we go. So,
I thought that was clearly understood that that's what that was, but maybe there was a secondary use I didn't know. Anyway, that was a fun aside. I just want to briefly register before I lose this thought that I also enjoyed the effect of the Rose flashback without, consciously realizing how they shot it. That was really cool. It stuck with me in a way that I can't describe just what it looked like and everything. But the character Sai, one of my highlights of the movie is the scene where he, when we revisit him after he has been impaled. And there were a few times throughout this movie where, like, obviously, the setting and the characters they're in, it's inextricably, like, a whole New York thing. And, like, I just kept getting the vibe that, like, I don't know, the characters from Oh Hello were going to come on at some point and make some really New York specific comment. And one of the times I was thinking that was right when Sai's character is like kind of waxing nostalgic about New York and like actually explicitly all of a sudden says like, that's why I love this city after he's just been horribly maimed and he and the EMT are about to fall to their fucking deaths. And like, I don't know if it's like that little part from Rhapsody in Blue starts playing, and I had been thinking it before, like, this movie's like really kind of in your face about that's New York, baby, and then a character just all but explicitly says that, and I thought it was so funny and like really fun and kind of self-aware. With fireworks. Yeah.
Rhapsody in Blue, otherwise known as the United theme song.
Oh, I was going to say Woody Allen's go-to sex music.
With adults or minors?
Well, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Oh, boy. Alex, what were you going to say about Cliff Curtis's character? Or something in that neighborhood?
Yes, I enjoyed that scene and the kind of chill drug dealer that he is, where he's got his bouncer. I don't know what the best word is for him, but he's got his gun out and ready to go after Nicolas Cage as he's basically taking Patricia Arquette and ready to leave after both of them are high on some form of drug that they've been given, which seems like it's probably different than what the other person has. And he's ready to pretty much go after him with his gun. He says, "Nah, man, it's cool, chill." I just liked the way he went about it. But getting back to the drug, Red Death, that is going around, I loved the inclusion of that in this film, actually, because it feels like most other directors or filmmakers or whoever would have had their lead character almost go on a quest to crack the code and figure out who has bestowed this terrible form of heroin on the city, and I'm going to take them down while saving lives at the same time. And this film really doesn't care about that background story going on of this. It's much more interested in the saving lives that are being impacted by this new drug that is quite deadly. And I really do like that goes unresolved at the end, and there's really no explanation for what the plan is for dealing with this. It's just
kind of like one more crisis to manage in amidst all of the other ones.
It's the newest thing, but it's just another thing they have to deal with.
It's hydrochloroquine.
Hydrochloroquine.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, that thing that I take every morning and it keeps me safe. Yeah.
That's why you do it.
She's had 3 heart attacks, but you know what? It's worth it.
That's right. Also, my lupus is gone and also never there to begin with.
I put it on my Big Mac.
I did, as Sarah was mentioning, just the view of him hanging off, being impaled on that fence is quite something. With imagining that these sparks are fireworks over the city of New York, what a shot that was, and what a shot earlier in that scene too, when they walk into the apartment and the expensive fish are just flopping on the floor. as the fish tank apparently got shot with a bullet at some
I was
point.
wondering about that fish scene.
That entire sequence is so great how it's just visual storytelling and nothing else, because you see his main girl, I guess, unfortunately murdered and shot in the head right in the front. And then, yeah, you see the fish on the floor, very sad, which, they make it a point to show the fish, and that Sai is very, I think, enamored with them, because during Frank's drug trip, he's kind of paying more attention to the fishy than he is to his new client. But I love the fact that whole sequence starts with almost like a mystery that gets solved, because they say that they got 2 calls. One was shots fired on this floor, and then a jumper on a second floor. And then we find out it's actually the same sequence of events. It just spans time and space, literally. And I love that.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's the kind of quantum shit that I just fucking eat up.
And I got to see fish suffocate, and that's what I eat up.
That's what you're into. Oh boy.
Wow. How about you talked about some of the visuals in this film? How about that crazy ambulance 30-second sequence with Tom Sizemore and Nicolas Cage after he takes most of the drugs that are in the ambulance already?
Never felt better in my life.
That felt, that felt like a Hunter S. Thompson moment where, they're just smiling at each other and driving on this crazed quest through downtown Manhattan. And it felt like a different movie there for a little bit. And I think it landed pretty well on what it was trying to accomplish.
I agree. I thought that, obviously, that's kind of what I like about all these random kind of, not detours, but sequences, of that the actions sort of take over the mode or the style, shall we say, but it never actually breaks. It bends a little bit, but it doesn't completely come off its axis as becoming like a whole other thing. To the point where what's most remarkable is that, in my opinion, one of the film's defining trait when it comes to its visual palette or style is that it sometimes seems monotonous. Like, somehow Scorsese is able to mask these editing choices and, pacing differences with the colors and I think in the lights, to the point where on the surface it almost looks like just the same images over and over and over in almost the same manner, but they're radically different, and I don't quite know how he and Thelma Shoemaker pulled that off, but hats off to them, because I think that's a very nifty trick.
Well, it makes me really want to watch it again, actually, and kind of look for some of those things, because I remember thinking around that time, like, if I didn't know anything else about the movie, like who directed it, I think, the musical cues would have been like one sort of thing. But like, I think by the time we get to the Tom Sizemore sequence is when I started thinking like it kind of, the way things are coming off the rails a little bit, the way the camera is moving and things seem to be going a little bit faster. Like I thought it did feel a lot more amped up, and like, I realized like I had moved imperceptibly so over the course of this movie, which, like you say, has a lot of the same patterns repeating. It's just like traumatic thing, but like in a way that is kind of banal, and that's, by the time it gets there, it starts getting sort of crazy. So yeah, I wanna see it again and just really sort of digest it a little bit more now that I've had it the first time around.
Not to mention that banging soundtrack. Obviously, Marty,
Pretty banging.
he always gets the old milk crates
he
out.
plays he's got a little tunes on there. Yeah, he likes his music.
Yeah, I'd say he was able to get a few gold standards in there. And I gotta say, it's very much pandering to this old chain gang when you're playing REM.
As soon as I heard that song, I was like, well, no fucking wonder Nick likes this movie. Jesus H. Yeah, that was great. That was one of the, and they were all, I liked all the musical choices, but I particularly enjoyed that one, and like somewhat knowing the background of the song too. It just, well, it seems like cliche and stupid to say that, like, oh, Martin Scorsese chose a fitting and effective song for this sequence, but god damn it, he did.
No, and he's one of the only filmmakers.
I was gonna say he picked a song that wasn't by the Rolling Stones, so that was good.
Yeah, that is true.
Was there not a single one?
No, and I, for one, am glad. I like them a lot, but
they don't need to be an average.
He goes a little overboard.
Just
on
stay
that.
in the gangsta picture, boys. But what's interesting too about the music is that the music in this movie, and I'm sure it's probably that way in all of his movies, and I just never really noticed because for whatever reason I was paying more attention to the soundtrack in this one because I'm like, this is the I be banging, yeah I do, but the music in this movie is like in conversation with the film itself. There are actual musical cues where a character will say something, and then we'll cut to Van Morrison, saying something that's almost a direct rebuke or affirmation of what a character just said, in a very creepy way. And I'm literally blanking on the lyric that was the most shining example of that. But if you rewatch the movie ever, you'll notice that if you pay attention. But like, it's funny how some of the actual lyric are set up on cue to literally comment on what is happening. And I very much appreciate it. I definitely appreciated the repeating motif of that Van Morrison song, which kind of became this late night anthem for Frank's late night anthems for his late nights. Nothing but the best here on Film Tank.
We haven't talked much about Mary throughout this, and she's an interesting character to be the real second build actor in this film. And she's just a very interesting character for me because we find out after the first, and I do appreciate too that we don't find out everything about her right away. The audience is allowed to make their own judgments on her character or her as a person in this film after we just kind of get no information about her other than the basics that you can grasp for yourself. But it's found out that she previously had a drug problem. I think it's at least somewhat hinted that she may have been a prostitute or had some sort of sex addiction at some point. And seeing somebody with a troubled past who even has the line about how she may have seen Nicolas Cage in her previous life as she many times had to be taken to the hospital. And he, I believe, says, "I think I would have remembered you." And just that kind of, is kind of a weird, almost cheesy thing that you would hear in some sappy movie that's directed by someone like Kenneth Branagh. But here, it actually feels earnest. And I kind of like what I said with the Red Death thing. Her character is always on the fringe in this movie. And other than that final shot where we kind of white out into the credits, she's always at a distance. And I think obviously that's a lot of what Nicolas Cage's life is that everyone, including himself is at a distance. But I think she provided a real good energy for the film. And was a good character.
I agree. The dynamic between the two is pretty great because it's really set up in an almost eye-rolling way. Not in the way it was handled, but just it's a trope in and of itself. Someone to play, an essential worker like this, whether it be a cop or healthcare professional, meets a person in a very vulnerable time in their life, and then they need saving. And I think what this relationship in this movie does a great job is saying she doesn't need saving. He met her in one of the worst nights of her life, but that doesn't mean that she's completely broken. And obviously, that in and of itself is more of a projection of what Frank is doing with himself and not with her. And the fact that they're able to move past that in the very last scene, and that's where they both kind of find peace moving forward, is, I think, very, very touching.
Yeah, I got to agree with all these sentiments here. Like, it's sort of surprising how even though you can see the development of the relationship or you can anticipate it coming, they do it in a way that's not cloying or super cliched. And, they're obviously both going through some shit, but they do both. It feels really earned, like the kind of the ending they get together. And just like sort of the peacefulness and the innocence of it. Like, I really liked that, and how that was what capped off all of the blood and the unpleasantness and the gore before. It was just nice. And yeah, she's a pretty understated character, but I did like Mary, and I thought that I like Patricia Arquette as an actress in general. Like, she's not, I feel like I've seen her play the same sort of character, but she is just sort of solid and everyday and just a good incarnation of this character.
Yeah. I think, Sarah, what you just said right now, wow. Just give me a moment. See, the problem with
I'll give you a few more seconds.
Working from home is that I'm actually doing a few things for work while we're recording this podcast.
No.
So I am patiently doing nothing but doing this podcast because I'm afraid if I so much as open another tab on this computer, everything will explode.
I got through like an hour and 20-ish minutes or so without being distracted, so I'm pretty proud of myself there. Problem is, our fiscal year ends in like 2 days, so I have a deadline tomorrow to buy some more books for the library, so I'm literally just online shopping. Anyway.
Thanks for just destroying my closing thoughts about Mary and how there was something about her.
Oh, boy. That's the kind of fun we have
That movie
here.
hasn't aged.
No, it has.
What?
It's
I've never seen that.
How many years old now?
Oh, boy.
Didn't those come out? Didn't that come out like the same year as this? Or like...
Yeah, that would have been like...
It was late 90s.
Yeah, 99, 98, 97, 96, 95-ish. Somewhere in there.
Yeah, somewhere in there. How'd you get the beads about Frank?
Somewhere in the span of a half a decade.
It is a 1998 film, so yeah, it came out a year before.
Yeah, that film is good because Matt Dillon plays a creepy... in a comedic role, plays a creepy stalker. And again, just like in The House That Jack Built, I don't think he's doing much acting.
No, I don't think so either. In fact, just saying Matt Dillon's name, A, gives me a boner, and B, while I actually back up what I said earlier, where I think Nicolas Cage is perfectly casted. 1999 circa Matt Dillon, I could see him playing Frank Pierce too, a version. He's got that kind of weird, grumbly intensity. Apparently, Paul Schrader wanted Edward Norton, which obviously
Oh boy,
would have.
that's kind of
He
eye-rolling
was
because
he was very hot in
I was
1999.
gonna say
Still
he was
is.
in demand. Is he?
I
mean,
can
I don't
picture that. Like, I don't know. I think it's easy to say, like, oh, the way that things turned out and, like, the person giving that performance, like, I can't imagine anything else. Like, I can imagine other things, but nobody has, well, he doesn't have that specific Nicolas Cage energy and humor that he brings to it. So I'm glad that it didn't turn out that way.
I completely agree, actually. But
Let's call it what it is. His career has went down the toilet in the last decade.
Yep. And the only
I
time
haven't been following, so I'm gonna say that maybe is a cosign of that statement.
and the
Maybe
only
there's
time
nothing
that
to follow.
even resurged was when he played a not quite parodic version of himself. So, do people say parodic? Is that a form of parody?
They try to avoid it because it sounds too much like erotic.
Oh, why would they avoid it then? That makes no sense.
I think it is one of those words that is actually a word, but you just don't really hear it spoken.
I like to say things, okay, that people won't say, like Black Lives Matter.
I mean, that's become a thing that even brands are saying now, just as a matter of course.
Sure. Did Leah Michelle say it? Yeah. Can we trust
So it turns out Leah Michelle is a big old bitch that nobody likes.
Normally I'd be like, I don't know if we should go that far, but yeah, this week has really casted a light on.
Yeah, I just want, like, to bring up even more things that will, like, really seriously date a time in which something was recorded.
We've never done that before, so this is
Oh, no!
Yeah, so thanks a lot.
Oh, no. No, so, trust me, the episode where we all talked about what the photo of Joe Biden grabbing a child's genitals definitely stayed relevant.
Oh, boy.
Well,
I think it's going to be relevant for a long time for one reason or another.
I would hate to listen to the huge chunk of episodes that were recorded in the months leading up to the 2016 presidential election. Because I'm sure I've been on that podcast explicitly stating there's no way.
That's
But
I remember
were you actually saying things like that?
I mean, I would assume that we made jokes, and I'm sure, and I would assume that some of the jokes were like, hardy har har, aren't we living in weird times? Because this is going to be over soon.
Right.
So,
but I mean,
a different climate.
You certainly weren't alone in thinking that. Like, I'm thankful that I didn't start a media or an entertainment podcast at that time and record all of those exact same things that I was saying and, at work to people.
And
I will say
the other thing is I don't own SNL and didn't have them on the show, so.
Didn't you?
No, he.
I mean, I feel like in a weird way you did.
Well, we deleted that episode. Alex, what were you going to say?
So, I was just going to say, I very clearly remember we had decided we were going to do an episode on the HBO film that I very much enjoy with Julianne Moore and Ed Harris called Game Change about the 2008 election and the choice of Sarah Palin as John McCain's running mate and kind of talk about the parallels between that election cycle and the one that happened in 2016. And then when the results came out, all three of us had no interest in talking about that.
Yeah. Weird. When did the HBO movie come out?
Oh, that came out a while ago. Even relative to when he wanted to do an episode.
Yeah, it was, I think it may have even been before Obama's second term started. It was in that time period. That film's got a lot of good performances because other than Ed Harris and Julianne Moore, it's also got Woody Harrelson, Sarah Paulson before she became really big, and a slew of other people. You were going to say
before she gained weight. I was like, whoa. First of all, not even true. Second of all, how dare you?
Before she gained all that weight. Wow, what a man. Good timing for that.
That I don't know. There's the whole idea of like commentary on that particular election. I don't know. That movie sounds embarrassing to me. Like I'd be embarrassed to watch it in 2020 or 2016, obviously. Like from the mindset of, boy, politics sure couldn't get any crazier, could they? Like it just seems like a real hubris-filled position, or pretty quaint, and it seems quainter by the day. TBH.
Well, I mean,
and I don't mean to attack you and say you were stupid for liking that movie.
No.
Not at all. But just like I'm just saying, I don't think some of these things age particularly well.
Well, clearly we are in a different universe than we were in 2008 because, I think most people thought that John McCain was at least like a decent Republican choice.
There were Democrats that were like, well, he's giving Obama a run for his money.
Yeah, and then he made a choice to try to go for the gold, and it didn't work out. But it's a different atmosphere where some of the things she says, people are like, oh, that person's dumb, they can't be president, and now it doesn't matter. So
turns out we were a bunch of fucking idiots.
Ain't that the truth, brothers and sisters?
Oh no! Anything else we want to have some conversation on before going to final rating?
Any other topics we want to bring up?
I don't know. There's nothing much else going on.
No, I think we can go to final ratings.
Okay.
Do you want to go first, Alex, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm leaning towards a higher rating, but I'm going to stick with my initial rating since I've only seen it the one time and give this film a 3 out of 5. I think I talked myself into a higher rating, but I definitely want to watch this again to give this another try and look through some of the parts of this film and some of the messages that are happening on the screen on a second viewing. I think that this is a good movie, and the more I think about it, I think the more I like it. But there's definitely some parts of this that just aren't my speed, and it's really nothing against it because it's a perfectly fine film and definitely has a lot of intriguing aspects to it. But for me personally, this isn't my favorite kind of Scorsese film. And it didn't really click with me in the way that his other works have. So I still enjoyed it, and I give this a 3 out of 5.
Sarah, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to say this is a movie that was good, and I fully expect to appreciate it more on a subsequent rewatch. So with that in mind, I'm going to start at 3.5 stars and fully expect to bump it up to 4 stars on a next viewing. Or if it hits me just right, 4.5. I think there's just a lot of sort of subtle richness to be plumbed from this movie, and anybody else who maybe doesn't think that they're like the biggest Scorsese fan, like don't make too many assumptions. Check this bad boy out. And remember to clap for your healthcare workers at 7 p.m., but do not do anything to materially improve their lot in life. The end.
I could not have said a more moving sentiment. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
I give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. This is my...
Whoa!
Yeah, I really went up there. And this is my second time viewing this movie. And I gotta say, really tickles all the right pickles, if you know what I'm saying. And I pretty much feel like I laid it all right out there on the table during this episode, so I don't have much else to add. But Scorsese, you son
More
of a
like
bitch.
score. I'm feverishly trying to think of a good wordplay joke with Scorsese, and it's just not happening.
No, yeah, kind of fucked it up, didn't you?
More like, oh, okay.
Okay.
More like more, says he, where he is you, and what you want more of is Scorsese movies of this vein.
Oh, I thought you said more Desi, like what Lucy
More Desi movies
would say during sex or something. More Desi, more.
No, that is not what I was saying. I think that my joke, it's a little bit of a walk, but it gets there.
I'm always thinking about housewives and their paramours having sex from sitcoms in the 60s and the 50s. What can I say?
Well, the dynamic between those two, how could you not?
More, Desi, more.
My God.
Do you know I Love Lucy invented the concept of the rerun? I don't know why I said it like that. I think I'm done for the night.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's an actual fact. I just had to fucking ruin it. Yeah, they were like, doing a new episode, and then for whatever reason
And then they were like, shit, we don't actually have to do this?
Well, that's kind of what happened, but like on accident, because they couldn't go through with whatever the next episode was going to be, and so they're like, okay, well, we'll just show a previous episode. But like, I know that sounds so quaint, but like, when they did it, they had A, no idea that they were going to start something, and B, so anyway, fun fact.
I mean, I guess somebody had to be first. Like, that didn't even occur to me that was a concept people would have to invent.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So you've redeemed your mention, your crass and horrible mention of that.
Thank you.
We won't retread that territory, but very good.
We won't do a rerun. Okay, I'm done. You kind of set me up for that one, though.
Good stuff. Well, if anyone out there has any additional thoughts on bringing out the dead, always feel free to send them on to us at filmtankshow@gmail.com or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter at Film Tank Show. Also, you can find all of our episodes whenever I post them at filmtankshow.com or also on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. Coming up on our next episode, a movie that I've been thinking about quite a bit with the current events that are going on that isn't super...
Oh, boy.
Well, I was just going to say...
He's going to be like Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, it's not super relevant. I liked that. Not super relevant, but also... I think has some crossover to what's been going on here recently. And that is the Best Picture winner from 6 years ago?
Yeah, about that.
2014.
14. Yeah. Oh.
It was a very, very good film. I know myself and Nicholas went to Evanston to go see it in a packed house the weekend that we went. The week before it was released nationally wide, yeah. And it's definitely better than The Cobbler. So well done.
Now, do you know that for a fact? That's what I thought.
Oh, man. I'm never going to find out, so I guess I won't ever actually know. But I'm going to assume that, at least for me personally, there's
I don't know.
a real high chance.
I think The Cobbler might be an uncut gem, you know? You look a little closer.
Oh, man. You're on a roll here. This is good.
Thank you.
But anyways, Spotlight, a very good film, and definitely, I don't want to say an eye-opener necessarily at all, because I had obviously knowledge about it, but just watching the events transpire.
Rude awakening.
Like,
they did what?
That just sounded like it's a little bit of insider knowledge on this whole thing, and can't say that anything was all that surprising. I think me and Sarah both had the same thought of like it accidentally sounded like you were like, yeah, I was a little step ahead of these kooks.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I more meant because the film came out after the events happened. But that's all right. That's okay. I probably should have said it a little bit better than that.
Before the events.
Yeah, no, you guys both uproariously laughing at the same time probably cements that I just made myself look a fool. So that's great.
I had a different interpretation that was also kind of wrong, but
so somehow
I was laughing at the idea that this movie broke the scandal to you, like completely.
Oh.
That's what tickled me. I just want that to be clear.
So to be clear, two different pickles, same kind of tickle. You know, I mean, these were different reactions.
One is dill, one is real.
Oh.
Okay. Well, just to clarify for everyone, especially the two co-hosts on here with me, I was aware that this happened before the film was released. It was only when the preview came out, but I was aware. That didn't land. That's okay.
It's okay.
It's going really terribly right here.
I feel really awful that we're making you clarify that. Like,
oh no! I mean, I don't have to. I'm doing this because
you're doing it to yourself, but we're also making it happen.
I feel like I need to shame myself a bit for this, but you know what? Sometimes that's okay.
When you think about this, isn't that bad? Because imagine like 72 hours to, I don't know, 96 hours of this, because that's pretty much what it's like when I go visit Sarah up in the old homestead.
It's kind of like, nonstop shit takes.
Yeah. And recently, Sarah and her fiance got a roommate, and shout out!
God, the dynamic that creates then when Nick visits. Yes, shout him out.
Shout out to Alec, not Alex, Alec, Sarah and Andy's roommate, because I feel like he brings out the absolute best / worst in me and maybe / Sarah. When we're in the same room.
He's an earnest, good person, and that's kind of the crux of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is going to go down
also
as one of our best, I think, episodes ever.
I think so, and it's probably because I am now elevated to series regular. You're welcome.
Alec, you want to really quickly take us home?
I was going to say, thank you to Sarah for joining us again, as now she is a self-proclaimed series regular. And from Sarah, Nick, and myself, Alex Diekman, thank you very much. We'll look forward to joining you next time here on Film Tank.
Good night.